When was the last time we had sex?
Where's your book going, by the way?
Main character is about to batter her husband to death with a hammer.
Shut up.
A woman alone in the rural wilderness battles a mind that is actively trying to destroy her, spiraling into a madness that threatens to devour everything she loves, including her loving husband. Carl Jung once said, "Be silent and listen. Have you recognized your madness and do you admit it? Accept your madness and let the light of your madness shine, and it will suddenly dawn on you." And that is exactly where Lynne Ramsay's Die, My Love, places us. It forces us to admit the madness. Starring Jennifer Lawrence as Grace and Robert Pattinson as her husband Jackson, this film isn't just a portrait of postpartum depression. It is a forensic examination of the total disintegration of the self. Most movies about mental illness try to make you sympathize with the sufferer. Ramsay does something different. She makes you inhabit the sensory overload of the breakdown. Today, we aren't reviewing the cinematography or the performances. We are psychoanalyzing the human behavior driving this collapse. We're dissecting the mechanism of postpartum psychosis, not as a medical checklist, but as a terrifying shift in reality. We're going to unpack how the mind fractures when the pressure of mother obliterates the reality of person. From the opening scenes, the film locks you into a mental shortcut. You see a mother, a baby, and a loving husband. Your brain simplifies. You think, she is struggling, but she will overcome. That's the trick. Because Ramsay immediately undermines that hope. The primary conflict here isn't between Grace and her husband, or even Grace and her baby. It's between Grace and her own sensory processing. Look at how the environment is introduced. The Montana wilderness isn't presented as a peaceful escape. It's an echo chamber. Every sound is amplified. Watch her interactions here. She becomes impulsive, almost animalistic. Freud might call this the unshackling of the id. The societal constraints, be a good mother, be a quiet wife, be stable, are dissolving. The movie escalates by introducing danger not from the outside, but from her own agency. She starts taking risks. This isn't just bad judgment. This is the psyche attempting to feel something other than the crushing weight of the void. And here's the trick the film plays on the audience. You start rooting for her erratic behavior because it feels like freedom. When she screams, when she runs, it feels like a release. You're no longer neutral. You are complicit in her mania because the alternative, the silence of that house, feels like death. The rising action here is the seduction of madness. It feels better than the numbness. But then the ground keeps shifting. We hit the second conflict, and this is where the tragedy becomes systemic. Jackson steps in. He represents the reality principle. He tries to medicalize, to organize, to fix. And this is where the behavior creates a paradox. The more he tries to help, the more he validates her paranoia. To Grace, his rationality feels like violence. Why? Because once you are in the grip of psychosis, logic doesn't look like help. It looks like gaslighting. The film shows us the destruction of the couple unit. We see Jackson's empathy burn out, replaced by fear. This is the moment the show stops feeling like a drama and starts feeling dangerous. Because a terrified husband is no longer a safety net. He's an antagonist. And that's the key. The conflict isn't that she is sick. It's that her sickness renders her intelligible only to herself. She is speaking a language of symbols and pain, and he is speaking English. The bridge between them hasn't just burned. It never existed in this new reality. The tragedy is that they are both right, and that is why they are doomed. We reach the second comeback. But in a story like this, a comeback doesn't mean getting better. It means clarity. Remember the Jung quote, "Accept your madness." The shift happens the moment Grace stops trying to escape the machine of her mind and decides to drive it. This is the psychological comeback. She stops fighting for the version of herself that society wants, the good mother, and fully integrates the shadow. She accepts that the violence inside her is real. It's terrifying to watch, but psychologically, this is the only moment of agency she has. She isn't a victim of her chemistry anymore. She is the architect of her own ending. By the time we reach the climax, you aren't just watching a breakdown. You're watching a transformation. It's not a positive one, but it is powerful. She reclaims control by burning down the structures that trapped her, metaphorically or literally, and that's exactly why it works. The comeback is her refusal to be fixed. It's her demand that the world witness her pain exactly as it is, without sanitizing it. She forces the world to look at the ugly, bloody reality of creation and destruction. There is another layer here that the film quietly weaponizes: the body as battlefield. Postpartum psychosis is not just a distortion of thought, it is a distortion of embodiment. Grace's body no longer feels like hers. It has been claimed, stretched, repurposed. The baby feeds from it, the husband touches it, the world expects it to function. But internally, her proprioception is fractured. Notice how often she seems almost dissociated from her own movements, as if watching herself from a few inches outside her skin. In psychoanalytic terms, this is a collapse of the body boundary. The maternal role demands total availability, yet her psyche experiences that demand as invasion. So the aggression has nowhere to go but inward or outward in flashes. What looks like volatility is actually a desperate attempt to redraw the edges of the self. If she can feel rage, if she can feel desire, if she can feel danger, then at least she can feel something that belongs to her. And then there is the baby, the silent center of gravity. The film does something deeply unsettling by refusing to sentimentalize that bond. We expect oxytocin, instinct, automatic attachment. Instead, we see ambivalence. In Jungian language, the child becomes both archetype and trigger, creation and annihilation in one fragile body. Grace's terror is not that she does not love her child, it is that loving the child requires the permanent death of the woman she used to be. That psychic trade is too steep, so her mind fractures to avoid completing it. The infant becomes a mirror, reflecting back her loss of identity. And mirrors in psychosis are never neutral. They distort, they accuse, they multiply. By the time we approach the conclusion, the question is no longer whether she will recover. The question is whether there was ever a stable self to return to, or whether motherhood simply exposed a fault line that was always there. Die, My Love leaves us with an uncomfortable truth. We like to think that love is enough to pull someone back from the edge. But the mechanism of psychosis doesn't operate on. Grace's journey is a dark mirror. It reflects the terrifying reality that the self is fragile, and under the right pressure, biological, social, environmental, it can shatter into something unrecognizable. The film doesn't give us a clean answer. It gives us a raw nerve. It forces us to ask, at what point does the role we play destroy the person we are? There's a moment in the film that almost slips past you. It isn't loud, it isn't violent, it's quiet. Grace is standing still, staring at something ordinary. And yet the air feels wrong. This is the hook beneath the hook. Because the most dangerous shift in the human mind is not when it screams. It's when it goes silent and reorganizes itself around a new belief. Up until now, we've been watching chaos, but chaos has a pattern, and this is where the film tightens its grip. The twisted plot point is not a dramatic external event, it's internal. Grace stops reacting, she starts observing. Her mania cools into something colder, more deliberate. That is infinitely more frightening. Psychologically, this is the transition from fragmentation to consolidation. Earlier, her mind was splintering under pressure. Now it is forming a new structure. Not a healthy one, but a coherent one. In trauma psychology, there's a concept called maladaptive integration. When the original self cannot survive the pressure, the psyche builds a new operating system. It might be extreme, it might be destructive, but it works. Watch how her gaze changes. She no longer looks confused. She looks certain. Certainty, in a destabilized mind, is gasoline. And this is where the audience becomes uncomfortable, because certainty feels powerful. When Grace begins making choices that are morally disturbing, they no longer feel impulsive. They feel intentional. That's the twist. The film stops asking, is she okay? And starts asking, what is she becoming? Let's break down Jackson here, because his arc is equally tragic. At first, he plays the archetype of the concerned partner. Soft voice, gentle hands, rational solutions. But as Grace's inner world mutates, he begins to mirror something else, control. Not because he is evil, because he is scared. Fear in caregivers often disguises itself as authority. He begins scheduling appointments, monitoring behavior, watching her with suspicion. And in doing so, he unknowingly confirms her worst fear, that she is being surveilled, judged, managed. From Grace's perspective, the house becomes a laboratory. She is the experiment. Now, psychologically, when a person feels both invalidated and overmanaged, they search for autonomy at any cost, even if autonomy means destruction. This is where the film introduces a subtle but devastating psychological inference. Grace does not want to die, she wants to feel alive, And if destruction is the only sensation strong enough to pierce through numbness, then destruction becomes seductive. There's a behavioral pattern here called sensation seeking under distress. When the nervous system is chronically dysregulated, it will chase intensity to override the static. That's why her risky behavior escalates. It's not random, it's neurological desperation. And here's the disturbing part. The film frames some of these moments with beauty: the wilderness, the wind, the open sky, freedom imagery. That aesthetic creates cognitive dissonance. We see danger, but we feel release. That's intentional. Because madness often feels like liberation before it feels like collapse. There's another twisted layer. The maternal archetype in cinema is almost sacred, protective, self-sacrificing, stable. Ramsay dismantles that archetype without apology. Grace is not purely nurturing. She is contradictory, erotic, violent, tender, detached, all at once. From a Jungian lens, she is embodying the terrible mother archetype alongside the great mother. Creation and annihilation exist in the same psyche. Society allows only one of those faces. The other gets repressed. Repression does not erase, it ferments. The more Grace is pressured to perform goodness, the more the shadow swells. And when the shadow integrates violently, it doesn't negotiate. There's a sequence where Grace's laughter feels wrong. It lingers too long, it echoes. That laughter is psychologically significant. Laughter under distress can be a displacement of terror. It's the psyche venting pressure through sound. But dissociation is not dramatic, it's subtle. It's when you look at your own hands and they don't feel like yours. It's when the baby's cry feels like it's happening underwater. It's when time stretches. The film manipulates time deliberately. Scenes feel elongated, then abruptly cut. That editing rhythm mirrors a psychotic mind's temporal distortion. Minutes feel like hours. Hours disappear. Now let's talk about identity erosion. Before motherhood, Grace had ambiguity, desires, complexity, maybe even chaos. After motherhood, her identity is supposed to narrow. Mother, wife, stable adult. The social container shrinks. Psychologically, identity foreclosure can be destabilizing. When a person's multifaceted self is reduced to one role, the suppressed aspects don't vanish, they rebel. Grace's rebellion is not a political act, it's existential. She is fighting not against her child, not against her husband, but against erasure. And here's where the plot subtly twists again. The audience expects intervention, a hospital, a diagnosis, a rescue, but the film withholds clean institutional solutions. Why? Because institutionalizing the problem would reframe it as clinical. Ramsay keeps it intimate, domestic, unresolved. That forces us to confront a terrifying inference. What if the environment that is supposed to heal is part of the fracture? The isolation of rural life amplifies internal noise. The absence of social mirrors intensifies self-doubt. There's no external feedback loop strong enough to stabilize her narrative. So her mind becomes its own echo chamber. Echo chambers create belief reinforcement. If Grace suspects she is trapped, every small controlling gesture confirms it. If she fears she is disappearing, every time someone calls her mom instead of her name reinforces it. Language matters. Notice how often she is addressed relationally, not individually. Wife, mother, not Grace. That linguistic shift chips away at selfhood. There's a haunting psychological undercurrent here. Annihilation, anxiety, the fear that you will cease to exist as a distinct self. Postpartum psychosis can magnify this fear because biologically and socially, the mother is expected to merge with the infant. Merge too much and boundaries dissolve. Grace's escalating behavior can be read as an attempt to violently reassert separateness, to prove through extreme action that she exists independently of the role. Now here's the most twisted inference. The film subtly asks whether madness is entirely pathological or partially communicative. What if Grace's breakdown is the only language powerful enough to express the suffocation she cannot articulate? In systems theory, when one member of a system destabilizes, it often exposes the hidden dysfunction of the system itself. Grace's collapse forces Jackson to confront his own rigidity, his need for order, his discomfort with chaos. The tragedy is not that one of them is wrong, it's that their survival strategies are incompatible. Grace survives through intensity. Jackson survives through control. Put those in the same confined space and something explodes. There's a moment where you can almost see it, the split point. The instant where returning to normal becomes impossible. Psychologically, once a delusion or altered belief system consolidates and is reinforced by emotional experience, reversing it is incredibly difficult. The mind protects its new narrative because it feels safer than ambiguity. And that's the core horror, not violence, not screaming, but narrative lock. When Grace reaches her psychological point of no return, it doesn't feel cinematic, it feels inevitable. And maybe that's the final twist before the ending takes shape. We often think madness arrives like a storm, sudden, external, dramatic. But this film suggests something far more disturbing. Madness can arrive as adaptation, as coping, as a solution that worked too well. Grace doesn't crumble because she is weak. She fractures because the weight placed on her identity is unsustainable. By the time we approach the final movements of the story, you're no longer asking if she can be saved. You're asking whether the world she was expected to re-enter was ever designed to hold her complexity in the first place. If this breakdown made you question who you were really rooting for, you'll want to stick around. I unpack stories like this every day, looking for the psychology buried under the plot. So, if this kind of psychological deep dive hits home, subscribing might be a good idea.